Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Federal Youth Network Departmental Showcase. I would like to begin by acknowledging that I'm here on the traditional unceded territory of the Mi'kmaq people. The Mi'kmaq have lived on this land since time immemorial, and I encourage you, no matter where you are today, to acknowledge the land that you're joining us from. Feedback from our students and new public servants has highlighted that there's an interest in learning more about the inner workings of each department and agency. So to support that, to support public service renewal, recruitment, and retention, the Federal Youth Network is offering a series featuring select organizations where they can address perceptions about their departments and agencies and highlight the important work that they do and share with potential employees what a typical role in that organization looks like. So this summer, we are showcasing a different department each week, and today we have with us correctional services. Alors aujourd'hui, dans les ministères sous projecteurs, on a la service correctionnel qui va nous joindre. As we move through today's session, please share your comments in the chat space, and you can send questions to the panelists using the Q&A button located at the bottom of your screen. You can send those questions in the language of your choice, as well as using the chat, of course, in the language of your choice. You can vote for the questions that you like by using the thumbs up button. So please don't send the same question as someone else. Please use the thumbs up button to upvote the questions that you like. Fur et à mesure que nous progressons dans la session aujourd'hui, veuillez partager vos questions en utilisant le bouton questions et réponses, Q&A, dans la langue de votre choix. Vous pouvez aussi voter pour les questions que vous voulez poser en cliquant sur le bouton thumbs up. So without further ado, I would like to introduce you to the team from Correctional Services who are here to talk about their department. Welcome.
Thanks, Jen. Bonjour, je suis Untitled Chapter, le modérateur pour ce showcase. Premièrement, j'aimerais remercier tout le monde pour se joindre et aussi remercier le Federal Youth Network pour cette opportunité. OK, allons-y. Je suis un directeur en ressources humaines à Service correctionnel Canada. Je suis localisé à Ottawa, dans la région Capitale-Nationale. J'ai commencé ma carrière au gouvernement fédéral canadien comme étudiant, donc je suis heureux d'être parmi vous pour vous donner un aperçu de Service correctionnel du Canada et de partager certaines informations sur des opportunités d'emploi à SCC. Je vais commencer avec un sondage et après, je vais faire un survol du ministère et certaines opportunités d'emploi potentielles. Et après, je vais passer la parole à Jennifer, Nina et Derek pour qu'ils puissent vous parler de leur expérience et travail à SCC. S'il vous plaît, mettez le sondage. Donc, combien d'infirmières travaillent au sein du SCC? 250, 950 ou 2500? Et la réponse, c'est 950. Merci. La deuxième question, c'est combien de psychologues travaillent au sein du SCC? 50? 250, 950 ou 2500? C'est ça, la réponse, excellent, 250. Troisième, c'est combien d'agents correctionnels travaillent au sein du SCC? 3250, 6250 ou 10 500? Encore bravo. Pour la majorité des personnes, 6250. D'autres questions? Corcan, un organisme qui permet aux détenus d'acquérir des compétences professionnelles à contribuer à la réponse au COVID-19 en produisant combien de masques à l'usage du SCC et d'autres ministères? 250 000, 550 000 ou 850 000? Combien de masques qui ont produit? La réponse, 850 000. Puis aussi, combien de jackets qui ont produit? 50 000, 90 000 ou 150 000? Encore, excellent, 90 000. Merci beaucoup pour participer au sondage. OK, là, je vais jaser un peu sur le ministère. The commissioner who reports to the Minister of Public Safety Canada heads CSC. CSC operates under 3 levels of management: national headquarters, regional headquarters, and institutional district parole offices. The national headquarters is located in Ottawa, while the 5 regional headquarters are located at various locations, provinces across the country. CSC is responsible for the care and management of some 22,000 offenders. Approximately 13,000 are accommodated at 43 institutions across the country. We also responsible for managing 9,000 offenders who have been released into the community under supervision. We have 14 community correctional centers and 92 parole offices and sub-parole offices across the country. Institutions are very much like small cities. We have approximately 19,000 staff, including correctional officers, parole officers, program officers, security intelligence officers, teachers, cooks, vocational instructors, healthcare staff like nurses, psychologists, psychiatrists, doctors, chaplains, and elders. Le SCC fait partie du portefeuille de la sécurité publique. Nous avons pour mission d'assurer la sécurité de la population canadienne, notamment par la prise en charge et la garde des détenus. La mesure la plus efficace que nous pouvons prendre en vue de contribuer à accroître la sécurité des collectivités consiste à aider les délinquants à devenir des citoyens respectueux des lois en leur offrant des programmes, des interventions et des services. Pourquoi? Parce que la grande majorité des délinquants purgent une peine d'une durée déterminée et seront éventuellement mis en liberté. Ils retourneront dans la collectivité. CSC is responsible for administrating the sentence of offenders sentenced to 2 years or more. This includes the management of offenders at various security level institutions, quality management, and timely preparation of offenders for successful reintegration, as well as the supervision of offenders in the community. The environment in which CSC operates and the needs of offenders under its jurisdiction are constantly shifting, changing priorities, fiscal restraint, and complex offender needs continue to drive the effort to adapt, innovate, streamline, and collaborate. The 4 biggest groups of employees CSC recruits are CX groups, which are composed of correctional officers and primary workers, WP group, which is over 2,000 employees, which includes parole officers, program officers, Indigenous liaison officers, social programs officers, the NU group, which is nurses, healthcare providers, and CR and AS clerical and admin support, which are approximately over 3,000 employees. There's a very wide variety of different type of jobs opportunities at CSC, and employees in these 4 big groups are often feeder group into rewarding career opportunities. CSC is recruiting more than 300 correctional officers, including primary workers at women's institutions per year across Canada, more than 600 this year alone. Correctional officers maintain the safety and security of federal penitentiaries. They work shift work, including nights, weekends, holidays. The recruitment process for CX is a continuous intake inventory. We also have parole officer recruitment processes that are posted at times. Parole officers supervise and manage caseload of multiple offenders. They assess an offender's behavior, accountability, and potential risk to society. POs work in institutional and community parole officers. Other jobs that recruitment processes are also posted at times are correctional program officers that deliver important correctional programs to offenders daily. They motivate and encourage offenders along the path to successful reintegration. CPOs work in institutions and community parole offices. A CPO schedule will vary, occasionally need to work evenings and weekends. Clerical administrative support, CRs and AS, play a key role in supporting the frontline operations and corporate functions. They work in a variety of settings, including institutions, community parole offices, regional quarters, headquarters, and other offices. CSC is the largest employer of nurses, psychologists in the federal government. Nurses work in clinics located in institutions. Nurses work full-time or part-time and shifts, including some weekends and statutory holidays. If you want to make a difference, employees at CSC in every role can contribute directly or in a supporting role to make a difference in public safety and the lives of offenders. Donc, s'il vous plaît, allez à l'emploi GC sur le net pour voir s'il y a des affiches à SCC qui vous intéressent à appliquer. À ce moment, je tourne à Jennifer, Nina et Derek pour nous jaser un peu de leur expérience et travail à SCC. Merci. Jennifer?
Hello and bonjour. So my name is Jennifer Gould, and I just like to acknowledge that I'm located in Yellowknife, Northwest Territories, which is Chief Dragi's territory, the traditional home and land of the Yellowknives Dene First Nation and part of Treaty 8 territory. So I actually work in Yellowknife, Northwest Territories. I have been, well, I'll give you a little background first. Before I started working as an indeterminate employee with CSC, I actually worked with the Federal Public Service as a student in 2008. So I was working with the Federal Student Work Experience Program, also known as FSWEP, as a group information specialist for Service Canada Centres for Youth. And that was really my first introduction to working with the government. I became an indeterminate employee with the government in 2011, working within the public safety portfolio. And I've been a parole officer with the Correctional Service of Canada for about 5 years. That entire time, I've been living and working in Yellowknife in the Northwest Territories at the Northwest Territories Parole Office. We are a small sub-office and we're managed out of Alberta. We're part of the Prairie region. I'm one of 3 staff who represent CSC in the Northwest Territories. And I've really gotten a lot of opportunities from working here. A few years ago, I was trained in the male mainstream programming, the ICPM programs, correctional programs, and I've been able to deliver those one-to-one in the community maintenance program. And then since 2022, I've been co-facilitating the new employee orientation program, also known as NEOP, virtually using MS Teams, which has been very handy during the times when we can't always be in the office. Prior to that, I was also a primary worker, which is a correctional officer that works in the women's institutions. I worked at Nova Institution for Women in Truro, Nova Scotia before I became a parole officer. So as you can probably see from what I've talked about already, there are a lot of career opportunities within CSC from coast to coast to coast. We have a lot of opportunities to do different things. So even though I'm a parole officer, right now I'm also a correctional program officer. And in a small office, I get to do a lot of different things. One of the really unique things that I enjoy about working in the North is we work really closely with our community partners. So we work with our CMP, we work with the government of the Northwest Territories, with the probation offices, we work with their territorial correctional centers. We really do have a really close relationship. And part of that is because we have an exchange of services agreement here. So as you may know, there are not any federal facilities in the Northwest Territories. They're all further down south. But in my position, I kind of work as a hybrid parole officer. So I have a small caseload of individuals who were able to stay at the territorial facilities. So I supervise them as a parole officer in concert with the case managers that work at the territorial facility. So I get to do a bit of that. And then also for the people that are released in the community on conditional supervision, conditional release, I'm the parole officer for them too. So this is similar in the South, where there is small rural offices that do parole. So they'll work closely with the community services and may travel for their work. So you might have an office in one place, and then you would travel to smaller communities to offer supervision. What we do in the North, because we're quite a large landmass, I believe, is like 1 million square kilometers that makes up the Northwest Territories. And since there's only a few of us and we're based in Yellowknife, we partner with the probation services. So if there's, say, somebody who lives in Tuktoyaktuk or Wilhakttuk, they might be supervised by probation services through that exchange of services contract that we have. So they would meet with the probation officer, and then I would still liaise with the probation officer to do case management stuff. So it makes it really interesting. I also get to travel sometimes to the communities to do training and to stay in touch with the probation officers. I go into the territorial facilities to meet with the people that I supervise. Sometimes I will go to court if they have questions about correctional programs or long-term supervision orders, that kind of stuff. They might ask us to come and speak in the courts. I also work with a lot of community nonprofit organizations like the Arctic Indigenous Wellness Foundation, Tree of Peace Friendship Center, the Northwest Territories John Howard Society, and the Elizabeth Fry Society that's for the North, Native Women's Association, women's centers, all the different resources, because we do support both male and female offenders. Our population in the Northwest Territories is about 44,000 people, which may seem small for some of you that are living in the bigger cities. And like I mentioned, that population is spread out, but about half of those people are located in the capital, which is Yellowknife, and the rest are spread out about 33 communities. One of the nice things too, or interesting things about the Northwest Territories, is we have 11 official languages. So in addition to English and French, there's 9 Indigenous languages. So there's Inuktitut, Inuvialuktun, Inualuktun, Gwich'in, Klecho, North Slavey, South Slavey, Cree, and Chippewan. And the demographics here are interesting too. About 51% of the population is Indigenous. So First Nations, Inuvialuit, Métis, 39% are European, and then 10% are from various visible minorities, according to the census in 2016. So it may have changed over the last few years, but it kind of gives you an idea of the diversity that we have here in the Northwest Territories. We fulfill the role of community parole officer and institutional parole officer. We also do training, we do case prep, we do conditional release, we do preliminary assessments. Some of these terms may not be familiar to you, but because we're in a small office, we kind of do everything from sentencing as a federal sentence, all the way out to supervision in the community. What else can I tell you about being up here? It's a really diverse job. You get lots of opportunities. Sometimes people may not realize that working in a smaller office is going to give you those opportunities, but I found, at least for myself, that it really has. It's a small team. You have to work closely. You really do have to utilize all the partners that you have, but you get to make all of these great relationships and a chance to kind of do everything and really see somebody as they move through their sentence and hopefully are reintegrating back into their home communities. So it's a really interesting job with lots of opportunities, and I really enjoy it. So that's a bit about me in the Northwest Territories.
Thanks, Jen. Nina?
Hi, yeah. My name is Nina Halstead, and I'm joining you from the Kingston area of Ontario, which is traditionally Haudenosaunee and Anishinaabe territory. A little bit of background about me. I started out my career in 2016 in mental health services at Edmonton Institution, which is a maximum security male institution located on the outskirts of Edmonton, Alberta. And when I was working there, I was working in the moderate intensity intermediate care unit within mental health services. From there, I transitioned to Millhaven Institution, another maximum security male facility on the outside of Kingston, Ontario, still working in mental health, but at the primary care level. And I'll go through a little bit what the different kind of levels of care are in a minute here. I spent 5 years working as a behavioral technologist within mental health, all at the maximum security level. And after that, I spent 1 year working as a parole officer. During that time, I was fortunate enough to gain a variety of experience working with maximum and medium security offenders, offenders with significant mental health needs, LGBTQ2+ offenders, and working within the structured intervention unit. From there, I transitioned to my current role within the employment equity, diversity, and inclusion team. So you'll see on my name, it says Project Coordinator EEDI, and that's what that means. This team is part of Human Resource Management, which functions at the national level, meaning that our team and our work spans across all regions and has broad impacts across the service. And for a little bit of background, CSC has 5 regions that span across the entire country. So when we say that we're a national team, that means that our work applies to all employees across all sites in all provinces and territories within Canada. So for my presentation, I'm going to give you a brief overview of what mental health services looks like in CSC, since that's where most of my experience is. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about the work that I'm doing now with the EDI team. So the function of the mental health services department at any institution is to provide mental health care to offenders. Teams are multidisciplinary, which means they often consist of a combination of psychologists, mental health nurses, behavioral technologists, which was my job, social workers, and occupational therapists. Some of these employees started out doing practicums with CNC and stayed on after graduation. Some came just through the regular process. What's really nice about having such a diverse group is that everybody brings their own strengths, experience, and interests to the team. So while someone may specialize in, say, cognitive processing therapy, someone else may practice cognitive behavioral therapy or something similar. You really have the opportunity to apply your own interests to the work that you're doing and to specialize your skills in that way. As far as the ins and outs of providing services, the first thing to know, and I spoke about a little bit earlier, is that there are different levels of care within federal institutions. So primary care is a service level provided to offenders with low to low moderate mental health needs. Those are guys that can be seen on, say, a weekly or a bi-weekly basis who don't require, say, 24-hour care, things like that. Offenders with higher mental health needs, who might require more intensive or frequent services, are considered to have moderate mental health needs and may live on what we call the moderate intensity intermediate care units. These units are typically separate living units within the institutions that are intended to provide a more therapeutic atmosphere with more frequent access to services and to clinicians. And finally, what we have is the sort of higher tier is the high intensity intermediate care unit for offenders with high mental health needs. These units are typically housed within our regional treatment centers. And those treatment centers function as psychiatric treatment facilities within the prison system. So offenders in the high intensity care units typically are in these RTC treatment centers, and they typically have access to 24-hour nursing care and a dedicated mental health team, which is, again, multidisciplinary. One of the really neat things about working in mental health is that you get the opportunity to work with lots of other departments to provide a more comprehensive level of care to offenders. So this could include working with parole officers to make sure that treatment planning targets some of their identified need areas within their correctional plan, or working with Indigenous elders or Indigenous liaisons to ensure that Indigenous offenders are receiving culturally competent, culturally congruent care. While you have to be mindful of confidentiality, you really get the opportunity to make it a team effort and to learn about other people's roles within the institution, which personally goes a long way, I think, goes a long way as far as understanding where other people are coming from and learning to work as a team within such a diverse environment. As far as what a day in the life of a mental health services employee looks like, there's honestly quite a lot it could be. To keep it simple, as far as things that we do, I've broken it down into 3 things. So that's assessment, intervention, and crisis management. So when we look at, when we first meet with an offender, we generally try to do an intake assessment or a triage, and this helps us determine their current concerns, their mental health history, symptoms, and needs, amongst other things. From there, we determine what, if any, kind of services we can provide them. That's the intervention piece. So depending on their needs, this may be short-term, long-term, it might be individual treatment like CBT, group therapy, psychiatric medication, or so on. Finally, there's crisis management, which is usually the more immediate assessment of risk of harm to self or others. So this typically involves short-term management of risk, assessment and management of risk, which again, depending on the offender's needs, can also be paired with longer-term risk reduction and management strategies. So for example, this could include the creation and implementation of a behavior management plan. On any given day, a mental health professional could engage in any of these tasks or all 3 of them. They may meet with a new offender for triage, then see a regular client for therapy and respond to a crisis later in the day. Working within an institutional environment like that, you really have to be able to adjust to the changing needs of the offenders and the institution and the department, really. So it can vary a lot day by day what it looks like. What I've covered about mental health is it's relatively brief. You could go into a lot of detail about it, but it gives you a good overview of how the mental health departments within an institution work. Beyond what I just described, there's certainly other tasks they can complete, like risk assessments, transfer comments, discharge planning, and more. But for the purpose of this, I think that's a generally good overview. So moving on to what I do now, I've been working with the Employment Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion team for about 4 months now. And what's really neat about this team is that it's employee focused, meaning that the work that we do is geared towards staff and not offenders. Although some of the work that we do impacts offenders as well. And it falls under human resource management. So as part of the EEDI team, the main driver for everything that we do is the Employment Equity Act. This act identifies four equity deserving groups who have historically been underserved, marginalized, or denied employment opportunities, and sets out standards for achieving employment equity and ensuring that no one is denied employment because they belong to one of these groups. So our team's goal is to apply a critical and anti-racist eye to CSC's policies, practices, and internal documents to identify where improvements can be made. We advocate for change on a systemic level, and we work to make CSC a place where employees of every ethnicity, culture, gender, religion, etc., are welcome and feel safe. To give you some examples of our work, the EEDI team has created the Black Employees Network, which is a safe space for Black employees to discuss collective commitments to preventing racism and discrimination, and a place that fosters meaningful dialogue about their experiences working at CSC. Our team has also created national action plans for Indigenous employees, women employees, racialized employees, and employees with disabilities. These plans serve to provide direction and accountability in CSC's efforts to improve the working environments and general employee experiences of the designated groups noted in the Employment Equity Act. Personally, I find this work to be extremely meaningful and valuable, and working with this team has been an incredible learning experience. Right now, our team has members from Ontario, Quebec, New Brunswick, and Nova Scotia. Previously, we've had members from British Columbia. We've had members from Alberta. We all bring our unique backgrounds and skills together to do some really amazing work within the service. And because we're a national team, we all work remotely. So I'm working from home right now, which is certainly a big change from institutional life. Much like any other federal organization, CSC is by no means perfect and has a lot of work to do to become a more safe, equitable, and inclusive place to work. But I'm really proud of the fact that I get to be part of the group who is creating change and moving that in the right direction. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nina. Derek?
Thank you so much to Anthony, Jen, and Nina. My name is Derek Paquette. Bonjour tout le monde, bienvenue à tous. On vous remercie pour votre patience. Merci d'être ici aujourd'hui. Mon nom c'est Derek Paquette. Je vais faire ma présentation en anglais. Par contre, si jamais vous avez des questions, s'il vous plaît, vous pouvez les soumettre en français, puis je serai content de vous répondre. As I said, my name is Derek Paquette. I am a National Staff Training Officer, CX3, currently in Kingston at the National Training Academy, or NTA, where we deliver the CTP, or Correctional Training Program, to future correctional officers. I have been working in corrections for, 13 years, since 2009. I've been a correctional officer since 2013. I was briefly trained and acted as a correctional manager as well, overseeing the day-to-day operations of the institution. And I have been delivering training to both staff and recruits since 2018. As you guys may be aware of, our mission is to provide safe, reasonable, humane, secure control to our offenders while providing an opportunity to rehabilitate. Nina and Jen have gone over their responsibilities, and I think it's a really good place to start because it shows everyone how diverse CSC really is. We have so many different partners, both in the community and within institutions, at a policy level, at an intervention level, at a healthcare level, anything you can think of being tied in from all over Canada to provide that safe, reasonable, secure, and humane control to our offenders, to keep our communities safe, and to also provide rehabilitation to our offenders. This is where we come in, operations. So security is paramount. We have a population of offenders with a diverse history. They come from places where they were disadvantaged, undereducated, abused. They suffer from mental health, they suffer from physical health, and their stories are unique. And ultimately, their stories result in their placement in a federal facility. Some of that requires security intervention. When you think about federal penitentiary placement, you're thinking about the most dangerous or the offenders with the most established criminogenic history. And because our institutions are so diversely populated, inevitably you run into security issues. That's where we come in on the operations side, on the correctional officer side. We handle the day-to-day operations of an institution in Canada. We are the CX1s working in all of our posts. So our internal posts, our towers, our external posts, our escorts, our mobiles. We are the CX2s that oversee the units and work in our communications and control posts that work directly with offenders to maintain casework and work with the interdisciplinary team to make sure that our reporting is accurate. We handle all of the security incidents. A lot of people don't think about what happens in jail after the famous offenders that you've seen in the news, for example, when they get sentenced and everybody feels safer, but they come to us and they require care. And it's our responsibility to preserve life and keep everybody safe, whether it's our offenders, whether it's the staff, or whether it's the public at large. And because of those diverse populations and because of the criminogenic behavior that comes associated with our diverse population, we inevitably, run into security issues. So there's a lot of violence, there's a lot of drugs, there's a lot of gang-related behavior, and it's our job in partnership with all the other departments and the public and all of our partners to minimize that and intervene on behalf of those offenders to keep everybody safe, including the public. So the day-to-day operations of a correctional officer can be mundane. It can be as simple as doing the rounds to make sure everybody's safe, to doing the counts to make sure that everybody is accounted for. We do the general safety checks for the overall institution. We, as I said, operate the control posts, do the mobile patrols, and take the offenders on their escorts. It can be as complex and complicated as responding to serious self-harm, suicide attempts, assaults, attempted murders or successful murders, intervention to intercede the contraband being introduced into the institution. We respond to medical emergencies, whether offenders are overdosing or having heart attacks or suffering from any number of potential health concerns. And we do this every day. And it comes in waves. Sometimes it can be a lot, and sometimes we can coast. And our job is to continually manage that risk to keep it in the green, because when it's green, it's safe. And when it's safe, that means that our offenders can take their programming, can get the intervention required, can work on themselves, and work with our partners in all of our departments to build the skills required to rehabilitate and go back into the communities, thereby making our communities safe. So that's what the day-to-day of a correctional officer looks like. We are held to a standard of law and policy at the Canadian Human Rights Act, at the Correctional and Conditional Release Act and regulations. It's a very demanding job. You see things that you didn't think were possible, and yet at the same time, it's so rewarding, because when you see somebody apply the feedback and make those changes in their lives, or you get to save a life, it's something that I can't put words to. It's something that you can't describe. I take a lot of pride in my job, wearing this uniform, keeping the community safe, being able to have that opportunity. We, as correctional officers, have the most intervention and direct interaction with our offenders. And so we have a big responsibility to both uphold authority and keep the institution and the public safe, while also creating and providing an environment that's inclusive, that's accepting, and that's enabling of making those changes. Now, my role as a staff correctional training officer is to provide training to recruits. So as you can see behind me, there's a facility. This isn't one of the provided backgrounds that you see. This is one of the ranges that we use to train in firearms, because we have firearms to keep our institutions safe in maximum and medium institutions. And in men's institutions, we also use them for our external escorts. So right now I have recruits learning how to use our 9mm pistol. But our training is so much more than, say, arrest and control or self-defense or firearms, because 95% of what we do is communication-based. We negotiate, we do crisis intervention, we do crisis management, we do de-escalation, we do mediation. We need to act in a way that, as I said, upholds authority, but also provides an image and an idea of what a respectful, law-abiding citizen looks like, and something to work towards. Despite all of it, despite all of the thousands and thousands of security incidents that we have a year, less than, I think, 6% of all of those incidents result in a use of force. So that means that 95, 94% of all of the thousands of security incidents that our institutions go through a year are resolved by communication. Canada is a world leader when it comes to de-escalation and communication. We have our law and policy to govern us as well, and that's what we learn here at the National Training Academy. So we start with law and policy. We start with how the Canadian Human Rights Act, the Charter of Human Rights, the CCRA and CCRR govern our conduct and our behavior. We have the Criminal Code of Canada, which gives us our authority to use force, for example, and also provides the guidelines for when not to use force, because it isn't always required. So we go over communication, we go over law and policy, we do simulations, ongoing and evolving simulations that get more complex and more involved as you go through the program. We work all of the time with our community partners, with the institutions, with national, our partners at NHQ and our partners at RHQ. It's an evolving organization, corrections is. Every year, policy changes, policy updates, the needs and rights of Canadians grow and evolve. And CSC is always trying to be there every step of the way to make sure that we provide that same standard to our offenders, because of course they retain all of the same rights as offenders, other than those that are necessarily restricted based on their incarceration. The correctional training program is 14 weeks long. You stay on site here in Kingston, where our team of 16 or so trainers right now at the NTA in Kingston provide the training. It's demanding. It's a lot of fun, however. If you put the work in, it can be very rewarding. It's a very diverse field, as Nina and Jennifer said. You can work in any number of different capacities or departments. You can go from a correctional officer to a parole officer. You can go from a parole officer to a correctional officer after you take the training. You can go from in the jail to doing things like what Anthony is doing now at NHQ. You can go from the institution to RHQ. You can go from CSC to another department. It's such a rewarding and diverse organization. The opportunities to learn are never ending. And that for me is part of the fun, is that challenge of constantly adapting, evolving, and in my role and capacity as a trainer and correctional officer, doing it in a way that's safe, reasonable, humane, so that I can provide that example directly to the offenders to show them that it doesn't have to be maybe what they knew before, and it can be what we show, which is respect, inclusion, safety, interaction, that negotiation, that human to human contact that is so vital to anyone's success. And that's what I love so much about this job. Since I've been doing training since 2018, I honestly I have a hard time seeing myself doing anything else. Having a direct impact on our recruits as we train the next generation of correctional officers to go into our jails and then take that torch of safety, of security, of adapting, of evolving, and of providing that care to our offenders to keep our community safe. To be able to have an impact on how our organization grows is something that's very near and dear to my heart. I honestly couldn't see myself doing anything else. And yet at the same time, there's so many opportunities. Who knows where my career will take me after this? So that's about it for me. I'll be happy to answer any questions, either in French or in English. So I'd like to thank Nina, Jen, and Anthony, and I'll pass it over. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Derek. That was great insight. I also want to thank again Nina and Jen and Derek taking the time to provide good insight of CSC and the work they do. So now it's the Q&A period. So we'll try to answer the questions as best as we can. We'll go with the most popular ones. So the first one is, why does it sound like the offenders are receiving much better care than the average Canadian? Well, on my end, I think why it sounds like it is because we're truly passionate about the CSC mandate, and like we talked about, we feel and based on results that we do make a difference, and we're part of something bigger. So I think what comes across is our passion and how we enjoy delivering on what we do. Is there anything, Jen, Nina, or Derek, you want to add to that question?
I think what's important to understand, on one hand, I could see how someone might think that an offender is getting better care than the average Canadian. On the other hand, I think it's important to understand where our offenders come from. They're coming from often, not always, but often disadvantaged homes, no support or structure whatsoever, abusive parents, abusive communities, or derelict or neglected communities. They often don't have access to good health care, potable water even sometimes, or education, or safety or security. It's cycles of abuse, whether it be physical, sexual, mental. And so in the institution, part of rehabilitation is providing stability and opportunity to the offenders. We're also responsible directly for their care, legally speaking, and also from a moral and human side of it as well. Because of that, we must provide them care. And that does two things. A, it provides that safe, reasonable, humane, secure control and care of those offenders. But B, it also gives that offender a leg up. How do we as an organization tell our communities that we're making them safer by providing rehabilitation and reintegration if we're sending offenders back out into the community riddled with health, mental health, physical health conditions or problems that could have easily been addressed or care provided, or without providing them the resources to maintain that health and care when they get out? Often some of those things are contributing to their criminogenic behavior or factors, thus leading to recidivism or repeat criminal behavior. And so our goal is to minimize that. And if by providing some direct care to a lot of offenders who have never had care before achieves that mission, then I'm happy to be working for an organization that does that.
Thanks, Derek. Next question would be, what is the culture of work like at CSC, possibly in the policy development roles? Is it hard to maintain work-life balance? I would say it varies based on the job and the location, the responsibility. But I think like all public servants, we all strive to find a work-life balance, but at the same time, try to achieve the results that are required. Jen, Nina, Derek, anything on that question? I'll skip to the next.
I guess I can say, like, generally the work-life balance, it really does depend. It's operational requirements. So it ebbs and flows, at least in my experience in the community in our office. Sometimes there's a number of fires that all happen at the same time that you have to kind of address, and that can make it a little bit busier for a while. Then there's times when things are going well. But a lot of it is self-care, and there has been a lot of emphasis on self-care and work-life balance within our department as far as trainings. They also have the employment assistance program. They have the critical incident stress management program where people help you if you have been exposed to something that could be traumatic, but to have the support around you, let you know that it's normal and support you for getting back to your normal. So I think with any job, really, there's always that work-life balance and maintaining it. And there are things in place to help us with that. Policy development wise, I'm not involved in policy development, but I do feel like there are definitely always ways that CSC is very responsive. So there's always surveys happening where they're trying to learn, well, what areas can we improve on? And then you'll see policies kind of stemming from that, from the research, from the feedback they get from surveys to try to improve the work environment. So is it perfect? I don't think any department is, but it does seem like there are things in place to help, and there's always growth happening and improvements attempted. So I guess that would be my take on it.
Thanks, Jen. Dina, you want to
Yeah, sorry, I just wanted to touch base a little bit on that as well. I think like what Jen mentioned, it's very CSC this is a very unique environment where there's lots and lots of different areas that you can work in, and the environments between, say, national headquarters and an institution are completely different. So to give a broad answer of what the culture of work like is very difficult and challenging, because it kind of depends on where you are and what you're doing. But like Jen said, CSC is somewhat responsive in the fact that we do we engage with the public service employee survey, and we take the information that we gather. We had a women's survey recently that was done across CSC. We take that information and we use it to inform the development of plans, the development of policies, in order to make things better within the service. Like Jen said, it's not perfect. There's certainly places to improve, but it is an organization. And part of being on the EDI team, what I'm finding is that we get the opportunity to really listen to people and take that information and advocate to make those changes to make the culture better.
Thanks. I see you. I think you're trying to answer, Derek, but maybe answer que font les agents de correction au quotidien. I think I think you pretty much touched it when you gave insight. Is there anything you want to add, Derek, to that?
Oui, si tu me permettrais, c'est que la question a été demandée en français, donc j'aimerais répondre en français juste pour assurer que la personne comprend. Dans le fond, en bref, pour la personne qui a demandé la question, ce qu'on fait en tant qu'agent correctionnel au quotidien, c'est qu'on effectue la routine quotidienne de la journée dans le pénitencier. Donc, on fait les rondes, on assure la santé et la sécurité de tous les détenus, on répond à tous les besoins, sécurité, urgence, soins de santé, etc. pour les détenus, pour le staff. On effectue les postes armés, les postes statiques, les postes dynamiques. On s'en va dans les escortes pour ramener les détenus à leurs besoins médicaux, par exemple, à l'extérieur du pénitencier. On fait la garde pour les détenus qui ont besoin peut-être une supervision plus accrue. On fait les transferts, etc. Donc, tout ce qui est opération, sécurité et intervention, sécurité pour les détenus, c'est la job de l'agent de correction. C'est divers, ça dépend sur la cote de sécurité du pénitencier, donc soit minimum, médium, maximum, ou même ce qu'on appelle multi-level. Puis c'est très dynamique. Sérieux, je capote parce que ça peut être différent, puis l'impact que tu peux avoir sur la sécurité de ta communauté. Honnêtement, je suis très fier. Donc, j'espère que ça répond à ta question. Merci.
Merci encore, Derek, pour répondre à la question en français. C'est presque tout le temps qu'on a. Y a-t-il quelque chose d'autre qu'on voulait ajouter avant qu'on dise les mots de fermeture? Anything you want to add, Jen, Nina, and Derek, before we say the closing words?
I've seen this theme come up a few times, so I just want to address it quickly as somebody who worked in the frontline operations. There's a question currently about a person that's expressing a bit of fear about working in a prison and asking if we've ever been afraid working in a jail and if that feeling's evolved. I had another person ask if it was safe to work in a jail, and the answer is sometimes. The reality of our institutions is that they can be a dangerous and dynamic place. Again, we're dealing with the offenders with the most established criminal history, which often includes violence. And have I ever been scared in a jail? Yes, many, many, many times. I think it takes an inhuman person to be faced with a life or death situation and not feel fear. However, that's part of the pride I have working for this organization, is that I get to directly, we as an interdisciplinary team, all of the departments, whether it be in a jail or out in the community, we get to impact that safety. We get to intervene and manage that risk. We make it as safe as possible within reason to work in an institution. And as correctional officers, it is our job to maintain that safety and security in tandem with all the other departments. So is it safe? It's as safe as it can be, but is there danger? Yes, there is real danger. And that's what we take the 14-week training program for. That's why we work with our partners so heavily. That's why we do interventions. And that's why we do programs and education, is to reduce that risk. And you know, I've been in very, very dangerous situations, and yet I get to be here talking to everybody about it. So there are risks, and you take that how you want to, but I don't go to work afraid every day. No. Thank you.
Thanks, Derek. OK, so on veut remercier le Federal Youth Network pour nous inviter, qu'on peut partager l'information du ministère. Comme j'espère que vous pouvez voir, c'est qu'on est des personnes, qu'on est passionnés du mandat et le travail qu'on fait. I hope it comes across that you could see that we're passionate and we believe in the mandate and the mission of the department. So if you're interested, we welcome you to apply to GC Jobs. And merci beaucoup. Have a great day. Thank you very much.
Thank you all for sharing your experiences of the work that you do at Correctional Services. Merci à tous nos panélistes qui sont venus pour nous parler de leur job à service correctionnel. Thank you to all of you, the participants, for attending this week's Departmental Showcase featuring Correctional Services. Don't forget to join us next week. We're going to be talking about stats. So Stats Canada and what we think they do versus what they really do. We're going to find out together. As a reminder, you can find all the resources from today's session, along with the recordings from this and previous sessions on our wiki page. We will put the link to the wiki in the chat for your reference, but it's also on the same page where you registered to attend this session. All the links will be posted there as well if there are any to be shared. And if you check back as early as tomorrow, you should have the recording from today's session. Alors, merci à tout le monde. Si vous avez des questions sur la session qui vient de se passer, l'enregistrement serait sur notre YouTube dès demain, puis toutes les ressources seront sur notre page wiki. On vous verra la semaine prochaine pour notre présentation avec statistiques. Puis à ce point-là, merci beaucoup d'être venu. Thank you all for your time.